All right, so we'll start more with like the second phase of your life being how you met Grandpa and your relationship with him. So well, Grandpa told me his account of how you met. What's your story about how you met?
Well, I think it'd probably be exactly the same thing. I had worked in a summer camp, up in a Jewish summer camp up in Tennessee, and got friendly with a girl, a fellow counselor from Miami, and she invited me to come during Christmas holiday. And initially, I didn't want to go because I didn't ever think I wanted to go to Miami. It just didn't sound like someplace I thought I would like to go. It had a bad reputation of being a place of noisy New York Jews. And I just didn't want to be associated with something like that. But anyway, I had nothing to do at home. And so I decided to go. And funny thing is, recently I found my plane ticket. Guess how much it cost to fly round trip from New Orleans to Miami in 1955?
$35?
Yes. How much?
35?
Well, no, it was a little more than that. It was
Uh,
$87.13.
wow,
That's what the ticket
that's
cost.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So I flew to Miami, and she. Do I look really dark in the picture?
It's a little dark, yeah.
Maybe I ought to turn on a light.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, better.
Is that better? No, so I think it's worse.
Well, maybe if the make it so that like the phone is like where the light is, so like the light's like coming towards you.
Yeah, well, the window is behind me, so that's what's. Maybe I'll. Okay.
Okay, so you were saying about going to Miami.
Yeah, so I flew to Miami, and this girl, this friend, she lived in a portion of Miami called Bar Harbor, I think it was, something like the Bay Harbor, something. It was really nice. Her family had a house out on a canal, and it was really nice. And so she knew Grandpa, because they were just a part of a friends, people who hung out together. Actually, her boyfriend was in the Army, and he was a real friend of Grandpa's, but he was in the Army and he was away, and she was actually dating somebody else. So she kind of needed to get away from me, get me out of her hair. And Grandpa had just broken out with somebody he had dated for a while. So he was kind of on the rebound, as they say. And that's how we met. So she fixed us up, and we had a really good time together. And it was the December of 1955. I was in the middle of my sophomore year in college.
Yeah. And how did you introduce Grandpa to your family?
How did I do that? Well, I guess after a year or so, we used to write to each other. We started writing to each other, real letters, with a pen and
Yeah.
a stamp and all of that. And so we used to write to each other, sort of, off and on. And I think the next Christmas holiday, I went back to Miami again. And then I guess after that, he decided he would come to New Orleans. So I picked him up at the airport, and my father was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, which he drank just about all day long, very black. And so he offered Grandpa a cup of coffee. but she thinks it's just, everybody drinks coffee. And so Grandpa, instead of saying, well, no, thank you, he just says, I don't drink coffee. It was not a great start. He wasn't very savvy in how to be, diplomatic. He just says, oh, I don't drink coffee.
Oh my
So
God.
that was the introduction.
Oh God. And I guess you recovered pretty nicely though.
I guess so.
And so and you got married what year?
1957.
In 57. And what do you
I
remember
graduated,
about your wedding?
I graduated from college in June of 1957, and we got married in December of 1957.
And what do you remember about your wedding?
What do I remember about the wedding? Well, I had been to many friends' weddings and other weddings, the family weddings, and they were always late. They said it starts at such and such a time, and then you just sit there and sit there and sit there, and nothing happened. So I told my mother, I said, my wedding is going to start on time, and I don't care. My wedding is going to start on time. So the wedding was set for 4:00. And, Grandpa's cousins from New York, an aunt, and a couple of people had come. And so it got to be 10 to 4 or 4:15, whatever. They weren't there. And so somebody said to me, oh, well, so-and-so isn't here. I said, well, why aren't they here? I mean, it said 4:00. So I said, well, we're going to start the wedding at 4:00. So 4:00 comes and they're not there. So I said, too bad. It says 4:00, period. So at 4:00, we started the wedding. And they got there, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes later. I don't know what time it was. So afterwards, I found out why they weren't there. And the reason they weren't there is that they were used to New York weddings where you have this big smorgasbord thing before the wedding, with lots of food and whatnot and so on.
Yeah.
Well, nobody in the South had ever heard of such a thing. And so the wedding says 4:00. It doesn't mean a cocktail party at 4:00. It means 4:00. So that's one of the things I remember about the wedding. It just shows you how you make assumptions about things. And I just figured they were rude people who didn't know how to read that it was 4:00. But the truth was, the bigger truth is that they were expecting what their culture, what they were used to. And I was expecting what I was used to. And so I was making one assumption, they were making another one based on their history and what they knew. And I was making one based on what I knew. And they were two different views of the same thing. And so it just kind of shows you that you just never know that what somebody else brings to a situation. It may look, stupid or whatever to you, and may look very normal to them. So it's a good lesson.
Yeah,
it was a good lesson. Don't ever make false assumptions about other cultures that you don't know anything about.
Yeah. And so just moving on to your well, first off, Grandpa was saying, well, I know you're not the biggest fan of Miami. So what was your feeling when you moved to Atlanta?
Say that again. What was my feeling when we moved to Atlanta? What about Miami?
You Grandpa was saying that you weren't the biggest fan of Miami when you lived there. And so what was your experience once moving to Atlanta and then eventually moving to the house you live in now?
My feeling about moving to Atlanta, I was thrilled. My sister was here, and a lot of people from this camp that we worked in, they all lived here. And so it wasn't like I was coming to a completely strange place. And I was thrilled. The other thing was is that he was going to be working or getting paid by the VA, and he was going to make I was like $4,000 or $4,500 a month, and we thought that was a fortune because it was so much more money than we'd ever seen at one time. And so it was very exciting to come to Atlanta.
Yeah. And so you had Aunt Marcy by like the late 50s, and then by 64 you had Uncle Alex and my dad. So what was
Your dad was the only one. Your dad's the only one born in Atlanta.
Yeah.
The other two were born in Miami.
Yeah. And what was your relationship like? Like, how would you try to raise your kids when they were younger? Would you try to teach them?
How did I try to raise my kids? Be a little more. You have to be a little more specific. What does that mean?
Well, like when they did something wrong, like how'd you try to teach them a lesson or to discipline them?
Well, I never heard of timeout. You know, we didn't know that term then. I can remember one time we were getting ready to go somewhere to something, and Uncle Alex was just dawdling around, and he wouldn't put on his shoes, and I said, hurry up, come on, we have to leave. You know, there are 3 kids, and he's just fooling around. And I said, well, you know, if you don't put on your shoes, you're not coming. So he still wouldn't put on his shoes, so he couldn't find them. I don't remember what it was. And so I left him there. You can't false, you know, threats and then not follow through. Then it doesn't. Then the next time you make a threat, it's meaningless. Doesn't mean anything. People don't, you know, pay attention to what you said. That's kind of the rule of thumb. If you make a threat that you're going to do X, Y, Z, you better be sure you do it.
Yeah.
I remember the time we Grandpa and I went out somewhere. I guess it was a Saturday night or something. And I said to everybody, clean up the kitchen when you know, get your snack or something late Saturday, you know, after Shabbat. Be sure you clean up the kitchen. So when we came home, the kitchen was a mess. And so I went and woke them up and said, you were supposed to clean up the kitchen. Now come and clean up the kitchen. So I guess you could say that was kind of harsh or whatever. But like I say, if you don't mean what you say and follow through, then whatever you say doesn't really have any strength to it. So I guess you could say that was the mantra. If you're going to say something, you better mean it.
Yeah. And obviously being Jewish was one of the most important parts of your life, and probably the ways you tried to raise your kids. And so what was the Jewish community like when you first got to Atlanta, and how have you seen it develop?
What was the Jewish community like when we first came to Atlanta? Well, it was certainly a lot smaller than it is now. You know, I was at home with three little kids. Aunt Marcy was not quite 5, and had a new baby, your dad, and Uncle Wayne, Uncle Alex. I wasn't really that involved in the Jewish community because, you know, I was just home with 3 little kids. There was no daycare and play groups and carpools. Oh, we only had 1 car anyway, and Grandpa usually took that to the hospital. So fortunately, there were some kids on the street where we rented this house, and the kids played with each other or they played with the neighborhood. And I was really involved until we got there in June or 1st of July. And then it got to be the holidays, Rosh Hashanah was coming. So we had to find a place to go to shul. So my sister belonged to AA. And so I called up and I made an appointment with the rabbi. And I told him who I was and that we just moved to Atlanta and that my husband was a resident at Emory and we'd like to come to shul. And so he just opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out 2 tickets and gave it to us. So you see, I'd had an incident in Miami, I guess the first year we were married, or maybe, the first year we were married, because we got there in December. So then we had all those time to till the holidays. So I called up this conservative synagogue that's this friend of mine belonged to, and I said, I'd like to, I'd met the rabbi once or twice, I guess. So I got put to the executive director and he started giving me, so I told him my husband was a medical student and that we were a young Jewish couple and we wanted to go to shul. And so he started giving me this hard time about, we have dues and I've forgotten all that he said. Well, I got really mad. And so I wrote him a letter and I said, what is going on here? I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said, here you have a young Jewish couple. I told them we kept kosher and we wanted to, come to shul for the holidays and why are you giving me this kind of stuff? I mean, here we are, we want to come to shul. And I was really mad. I couldn't believe that, I'd come from a place where, we always went to shul. We always were part of the community. So then I think I got a phone call back. I think I sent the letter to the rabbi is what I did. I think that's what happened. So I sent the letter to the rabbi, and after a little bit, I got a phone call from this executive director there, and he told me to come by and they give us the tickets. So they never messed with me again.
Yeah.
We lived there, we went to that shul for, the whole time we lived in Miami. And then in the meantime, my mother had died, so I wanted to say Kaddish. So I went there every Friday night for the 11 months, and I sat next to the same lady, the same place. She never talked to me. She never said a word to me. After a week, and she was there every week too. Never said a word to me, never talked to me. And that was also a great lesson that you need to talk to people. People want to feel like you care about them, and how can you do that? You sit next to somebody for a year and never say a word to them. So that was a big lesson.
Yeah.
The lessons all the time, you can take lessons.
Yeah.
So what was the Jewish community like when we first came here? Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know. It was small. There were like four or five synagogues. That was it. Everybody kind of, from what I gathered, sort of knew each other. I didn't know anybody except this small group of people who, I'd gone to camp with. And it was kind of fragmented. Everybody kind of stayed in their own little place because there weren't that many, but they all kind of got along and knew each other. It was just kind of like a backwater Jewish community in those days. That was what it was like. Now I know what it was like, but at that time, I wasn't that interested in what it was like because I wasn't part of it really,
Yeah.
except to go to school on the holidays.
Yeah. And how did you start to become more involved with the synagogue?
Well, we, after living here a couple of years, Grandpa went to practice, and so we had a little money. So we started paying dues, and and then we moved from this rental house to a house that was much closer to the synagogue. So I kind of got involved in the sisterhood, and we started going, on Friday night. We used to go on Friday night. They had a late service, 8:15, I think it was, on Friday night. So I got to know, people and got involved that way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Uncle Alex started going to the preschool. They had they called it a nursery school then. And so he was old enough to go to the preschool. I guess he was maybe, I guess 4 before he started to go. So that's how it happened.
And then eventually, like, you're the curator of the museum still, right? At
What?
AA? You still work on the museum at
Oh yeah, well that was much later. That was much later.
but
That was
eventually, like, you got to that point where, like, you were so important to the community, donating all these things and helping to curate everything, right?
well, yeah. Well, the first was I became president of the sisterhood, and at that time we had about 1,200 members, and had all kinds of things. Here's an interesting story. You used to, when you became active in the sisterhood, there were certain committees that you had to chair. So first you had to be the chairman of this, and then the chairman of that, and then something else. And then you sort of moved up, sort of like it was like a ladder kind of thing. So I started out, as something, whatever it was. And then I was starting to get closer to being president. And they said to me, well, you have to be the chairman of this other committee. And I said, well, I'm not interested in that committee. And I can find other people to do that. And so they weren't going to let me stay on the slate. They were going to kick me off the slate because I wouldn't do this, whatever it was. So I said to myself, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you do something like that? So I kind of organized a revolt, and I got people. So I put myself up as an alternate slate. And so there was the old established people of the sisterhood were very unhappy. And I used to walk in the building sometime to go do something, and I'd see little groups of people, kind of muttering to each other and looking at me. And then one time I went into the library, and Mrs. Epstein, the wife of the president of the rabbi, was sitting there, and a couple of these other, old timers, they were all sitting there. And I knew they were talking about me. And I just smiled and waved, hello. And so then we had to have a vote. The sisterhood slate, nobody ever voted on it because, you had it sent it out, and, you had a perfunctory thing, and that was the end of it. But this time they had to have a vote. So they called an open meeting or something, and there were, I don't know, a couple hundred people there, and I won. And so after that, well, then I became president, I guess 2 years later or something. But I just wasn't going to stand for that. They were saying everybody who becomes president has to do X. Well, that's stupid. You can always find somebody to do X. Maybe the next person didn't want to do Y, but if they were a capable person and were willing to serve, why wouldn't you let them become president? So that was one of the things one of the battles I fought there.
Yeah, of course. And actually, I'm not totally sure about this. So correct me if I'm wrong. But the only Aunt Marcy never got to go to Jewish day school, correct?
Yes, she did.
Oh, she
Yes, she
did.
did. Yes, she did.
So all your kids got to go to day school. Got to go to
Yes,
Jewish day school.
yes, yes. Well,
Um,
what happened was that when Aunt Marcy started first grade, there was only one Jewish day school here. It was way over on the other side of town. And it was small, it was very small. So we thought about it, and it was expensive. You had to pay the tuition or whatever. And so after a lot of discussion, we decided we were going to send her. And we even had like a minimal carpool. So we'd made, pretty much the arrangements. Then they called us up, I don't know, sometime in the summer, whenever it was, and said, well, we only have one first grade class, and so it's already full. So we said, well, okay, it's full. What can we do? So we just decided she would just continue in the public school. It was in the neighborhood. It was very good public school. And so that was a decision. Then about a week or so before school started, they called us up and said, well, guess what? We're starting a second session, a second group of first grade, and we have room for your daughter. So now, what do we do? So we pondered and talked, and I don't know, we just didn't know what to do because we'd already, gone in a different direction and had kind of, settled on that. We didn't have a lot of money, and it was going to be, kind of a strain, even though I'm sure we would have gotten some kind of, reduction in the tuition, whatever it was then. And the synagogue was close, and they had a Hebrew school, and et cetera, et cetera. And we just sort of weighed all of this, and it was easy. It was convenient in the neighborhood, and we just decided we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. And whether it was right or wrong at that moment, I don't know. So she went to the public school. And then when Uncle Alex became, it was time for him to go to school, we were already kind of established in this public school, and we were very satisfied with it, and just decided, okay, well, that's what we're doing. There's still only one Jewish school, one Jewish day school in Atlanta. So we're going along, and then Uncle Wayne comes along, your dad, and we sent him to what they had, a little mechina thing, and he was very unhappy. He was always crying when it was time to go, and he didn't, I don't know what was going on there that he didn't like or something. So when it got time for him to be in first grade, and he was in the synagogue, nursery school, and they had a pre-K thing. So when he got time for him to be in first grade, we said, wait a minute, this is not working too well. This is not good. And so we sent him to the Hebrew Academy. I think he got there in like, I don't know, first or second grade, something like that. So he stayed there, and then a year or two later, the Solomon Schechter School opened. And so here was our second chance at Jewish education. And so it wasn't difficult to make this decision. So Uncle Alex was in like fifth grade, I think, fifth grade maybe. And Aunt Marcy was going into ninth grade. And they'd both been in the public school when there was all kinds of turmoil. There was integration time. It was the early 70s, and it was a real mess. There were people teaching who probably shouldn't have been, but because they were Black, they got jobs, and it was very unsettling. And one time, she came home. Aunt Marcy came home from school and said that a teacher threw an eraser at her and knocked her glasses off her face. So I went to school the next day and I said to the principal, this is what happened. I don't know, why would the teacher be throwing erasers around the room? And so she said to me, I just can't do anything right now. She said, you go talk to the teacher. So I went to talk to the teacher. It was before the kids, a lot of the kids were still were already in the classroom, and it was before school started. And I said, my daughter came home yesterday and said that she got hit in the head by an eraser. So the teacher said, oh, well, I didn't aim it at her. I just aimed it at somebody else, and she happened to be in the way. I thought, oh, okay. So I left, and then Marcy came home and I said, well, what happened after I left? She said, the teacher said, well, your parents think they're running this school, but I'm running it, this classroom, and I'm running it. So that was not a really good taste. So anyway, there were little incidents like that. The schools were in terrible turmoil, as any change, huge change like that would be. And people were leaving the public school system right and left, going to all kinds of little Christian academies and any place to get their kids out of the public schools, because they were concerned about their children's education. It wasn't, in some cases, I guess it was racism, but in other cases, like us, I didn't mind that the kids were going there, but I was just concerned about their education. What's happening there and how chaotic it all was. So when the Epstein School started all of these grades, helped along, but all this chaos in the public schools, it was just a great opportunity. And so they all started there. But Uncle Wayne, we decided to keep him in where he was. He was happy there. He had friends, and it just didn't make sense to take him out of there and put him in a brand new school that we didn't know what it was going to be. We hoped it was going to be okay, and so we just left him there. So we had one child all the way across Atlanta in one school, and two children in what was then the Solomon Schechter School. So they all went.
Yeah, and you were mentioning about the public schools, that there might have been some sort of lots of issues with integration. And I was wondering, over the course of, you lived in the South your whole life, and what have been some of your experiences with some systemic racism and segregation and Jim Crow laws?
What are my feelings about what? About segregation?
Well, yeah, what was your experience with it? Was it just something that was kind of ingrained in the society? Was it something that was just this is just the way things are? Or did you feel like there was a problem?
Well, as I said, the reason for leaving the public school is because we were worried about our children's education, not that they were associated with Black kids. That wasn't the issue.
I didn't mean to. Yeah.
Huh?
No, I didn't mean to insinuate that. I'm just wondering, over the course of your whole life.
So, I'll tell you this. I grew up with Black people all around me. This woman, Zetta, that I told you about. Besides Zetta, my father was in a an engineering business that he employed Black people. Um, he had many Black employees, and they were used to come to our house on Friday afternoon, and he would write their paychecks. And so they would kind of stand around the yard, and a lot of times they would help in the house, Passover, or if something was going on in the house, they would, so I grew up with that. And I mean, to me, they were people. Of course, I knew that I was white and they were Black. And of course, I had experiences riding on streetcars and buses where there was a sign that said for colored only, and the water fountains. I grew up with all of that. I never thought, when I was little, that's just the way it is. I didn't think there was anything different, So when all the integration and everything started, I felt like these children needed an education and they deserved an education, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice my own children, for them. I've always supported the public schools, and whenever there's a tax referendum or something, I always vote for it because it's crucial to have public education for everybody. As far as other integration is concerned, you live in your own bubble, and so did I know other Black people except for people who worked in the house? No, I had I didn't know any Black people to say, they were my friends, or like you have Black neighbors, live right next door. There were no Black people who lived in the neighborhood. But I was very, very supportive of what was going on. And, when Martin Luther King died and was assassinated, and they had the funeral here in Atlanta, we had a neighbor who was very racist, old South, good old boy kind of guy. And, he had a Confederate flag in his car, all that stereotype. And he told us the day of the funeral, the neighbors, the women, we used to sit outside sometimes and watch the kids and just talk. So he told us, he said, he said, today's the day of the funeral. And of course, we knew that was the day of the funeral. And he said, where the funeral is going to be is not really that far away from this neighborhood. And they're going to march down Northside Drive, which was probably maybe 5 miles, 4 or 5 miles away. And this is the first white neighborhood they're going to come to. And you better be worried about this mob that's going to come down Northside Drive, and we're going to be the first white neighborhood they're going to come to. And you better be prepared. He said, prepared to do what? He said, well, I'm going to sit outside with my gun. Oh, okay. And I guess he did. We just sort of, all kind of looked at him like, geez. Of course, nothing happened. I guess Grandpa told you about going to the funeral. Did he tell you that?
Not that I can recall, but.
You don't remember?
No.
Well, the funeral started downtown, and he was at Grady Hospital, which is right downtown. And the funeral started down there near the Black neighborhood called Auburn Avenue, where the Ebenezer Baptist Church, you've heard of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King's church.
Yeah.
Yes? No?
Yeah, I have. Yes.
Okay. So that's where the funeral started. And so Grandpa said to some of the nurses, the people in the clinic, he says, well, I'm going to go out there to stand on the side and watch the funeral. And they said, oh, no, don't do that. It's dangerous. Don't go out there. So he said, no, I'm going to go anyway. So he went out and, just stood on the side of the road and
deference to the memory of Martin Luther King. And nothing happened. There was no riot. There was no nothing. And so, he came back in, and did whatever he had to do. So, we watched all of this going on, and felt a great deal of empathy for what was happening. But we had no real close connection to it because, we weren't interested in politics, except for voting. And so, we just didn't, we watched it and knew what was happening and cared about what was happening, but didn't have a lot of interaction, a lot of connection to it.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I was wondering, just as a follow-up, like, can you really, when's the last time you felt the country in a similar state of unrest about race, in the same way it has been about the murders of George Floyd and plenty of others? And when was the last time you felt like the country was like this?
Well, I guess you could say the last time was when George Wallace was running for president. So George Wallace was a white racist from Alabama. He'd been the governor. Yeah, he'd been the governor of Alabama, and he's the one that refused to let Black people come to the go to college, the University of Alabama, and he's famous or infamous for having stood in the doorway of the building and said, "I'm not going to let them come in." And President Eisenhower, I think it was Eisenhower or Kennedy, sent the National Guard and said, "These people are going to come to school, period." And he stood in the door and said, they're not. But they did, of course. And he was scary. I mean, he was running for president, and it was really scary. I mean, he was such an obvious, horrible racist. I mean, people say that Trump is a racist. I don't know whether he is or he isn't. But this guy was really scary. And I remember saying to a neighbor, one of the neighbors, we used to sit outside. And I said, if this man becomes president, I think we would think about moving to Israel. And so she looked at me like, "Are you kidding? Yeah, you must be kidding." Of course, she wasn't Jewish. And I said, "I just don't think this would be a good place for us to be if this man becomes president." And it was very, very upsetting. Then, fortunately, while he was campaigning, he got shot by somebody, and he was paralyzed in a wheelchair, and that was sort of the end of his campaign. But even during the assassination of Martin Luther King, it wasn't as scary as George Wallace. The possibility that this awful person become president of the United States.
Yeah. That is very interesting. What?
I said, did that answer your question?
Oh, yes, absolutely it did.
Okay.
And now moving away from less heavy matters, what do you love about Grandpa? What attracted you to Grandpa? And just what do you love about him?
We're on a different subject now.
A totally different subject.
Oh, okay. Well, he wasn't what I thought a New York Yankee was. In other words, he didn't have this crazy Brooklyn accent like a lot of New Yorkers have. He was very, very kind. He was very considerate. He was very gentlemanly. We had a nice time together. We, always had something to talk about. And I knew he had to be smart and had a good future. And why not?
Yeah, that's a good answer. And this may be a tough one, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
What is the happiest moment of your life aside from your kids being born and getting married?
Gosh, I don't know. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of happy occasions. I guess when Ellie Shevo was born, that was really exciting to think that we had, you know, our family now had the next generation. And um, I don't know. I mean, as I say, we've had lots and lots of wonderful occasions and things, but that was, I guess you could say that that was really something that says, well, you know, when I'm gone, there's going to be another generation of my family, and this this little thing is that link to the future. So I guess I could say that was it. So now all of you are that little baby.
So then what's your favorite part about being a grandmother?
Um, well, let's see. Just well, let me just preface it by saying this: I never had grandparents. You know, as I told you, most of them were gone by the time I was born. And so I didn't know what that relationship was because I never experienced it except with my cranky grandfather, who I told you all those stories last time. And so it was really something that I really wanted to embrace because I never had it myself, and thought that it would be just so cool, you know, to have a relationship with all of these different people who are now part of my family, and that it was just important to me to try to find ways to have a relationship with them, even though they live so far away. That was the downside of staying here in Atlanta and everybody else being someplace else, is that, you know, you just don't have the day-to-day kind of thing, like somebody, you know, say, oh, grandma, I want to come and, you know, eat popsicles with you or something, you know, or let me pick you up and take you to school, or, you know, that kind of thing. So there was always just on special occasions, and it always had to be, you know, programmed. It wasn't spontaneous. And so I just felt I really wanted to find ways to foster a relationship with everybody. And of course, Cape Cod was sort of our solution to having, you know, some expanded time, like it wasn't Passover, it wasn't a busy time for like Thanksgiving or whatever it was. And so it was very important to us to have those years where everybody was together, where the cousins got to know each other, and we got to know them in just a really normal, everyday kind of way. So, and I have to tell you, the reason we decided to do that is another lesson that we learned from somebody else along the way. We had some older friends, and one time we were together for something, and they were talking about their family tradition. Their children and grandchildren, some of them lived away, and they said that that during the Christmas holidays, they would take their kids down to some special place in Florida. They all like to go fishing. And so they would take their kids to this place in Florida, and they would rent, you know, a condo, or they would rent whatever, and everybody was there, and they spent a week or whatever amount of time it was, and it was so important, he said, for them to be able to do that. And it just sort of made bells go off in our heads and say, we really should do that too. We should find a way to have everybody come together and just spend a little time and have fun, and not have Jewish holidays and have a lot of hubbub and whatnot, but just to be. And so that's how Cape Cod happened. And so I hope it was important to you as it was to us.
It was important to me. And actually, that's one of the questions I wrote down was, what are some of your fondest memories at the Cape?
I don't know. I guess just watching everybody, interact with each other, and sitting on the beach. I know that the Judah and Max and Jake, they would make these big ponds in the beach and go catch little crabs and put. Do you remember that? Do you remember doing that?
Yeah, I didn't do it with them because I was too little.
Yeah, you were too little. But they would make these big rivers, out of sand in the beach, and then fill it with water, and then go find little crabs and things and put them in there. And it was a big project, because you and Jonathan were younger, so you didn't really participate in it, but that was cute to watch them all together digging around the sand and making these little constructions or whatever they were. I don't know. I really don't have a favorite time. It was just nice, just for everybody to be there, and just to watch everybody having a good time. And there was nothing. There was no one favorite thing. The most favorite thing was just to be there. But I guess the most interesting was when we were there for the hurricane. Do you remember being at the Cape Hurricane?
It was just the five. It was just the six of us.
Yes. Nobody else could get there that day, and we were all there. We were just there together, and that was kind of interesting. But we were so happy that nothing happened in that house. And I remember the owner of the house came by after it was over, and he said, "You mean you still have your lights and everything?" We said, "Yeah." He says, "I don't have any of my lights."
I remember that.
Remember that?
It was crazy because there was no rain. It was just wind.
Yeah, that terrible wind.
We went. I don't know if you came, but my dad and I and Jonathan, we went down to the lake, and there are waves all over the place. It was really a surreal experience. That was really interesting.
I guess that was the most memorable summer. And then they all came later, the next day or something. I don't remember, but it was a much shorter trip because of the weather.
Yeah, well, actually, one of my fondest memories is, I don't know if you remember that paddle game that my dad and I used to play on the beach with Jonathan.
Oh yeah, the Israeli paddle game.
Kadima.
Oh yeah.
And once my dad didn't want to play with me, Jonathan didn't want to play, Sharona, no one wanted to play, but you got up and you're like, "Eli, I'll play with you." I don't know. It's just I always remember that. And always grateful to you for that.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Yeah. And I guess you've kind of already answered this question already, but what does it mean to you to see your family have grown this much into so many people, and did you ever expect this to happen?
Well, when everybody was growing up, I didn't think much about it, really, because it just wasn't something you were too busy, with 3 kids and all kinds of activities and whatnot. I never thought about it then. But then as you know, as Aunt Marcy and Uncle Alex got married and started having kids, as I said, you know, seeing this future coming about, it was just very exciting. Then you know all the personalities, you know, everybody brings their own personality to the table with, you know, like, it was always so simple when there were just 5 of us and we all knew each other's personalities. Then you had these people from another family, like Uncle Aaron with his personality. And then we had Aunt Amy with her personality. And then your mom with her personality. And everybody kind of mixing it up together. Not that, you know, not that we ever mixed it up in a bad way, but you know, finding accommodation, you know, when your child marries somebody and this other person now becomes such an intimate part of your family, it's kind of an adjustment. You know, you read all kinds of horror stories about in-laws and terrible fights and, you know, people, siblings and their spouses not getting along and all kinds of horror stories. And you just hope it doesn't happen, that you just hope that people will accept the strangers for what they are and who they are, and that the people who marry into the family will accommodate to our family. And I think so far we've been pretty successful. What do you think?
I'd agree with that.
Oh, okay.
No, I think we do a good job of keeping everyone together and trying to see each other all at the same time. I appreciate.
And what I hope for the future is that all of you cousins, you know, there are 9 of you, and I hope that you'll try to foster a relationship with each other. That you know, you've all kind of grown up in different cities, but at least you've been together with your cousins enough that you know, as you know, get older and go into your careers and hopefully get married and have your own children, that you'll continue to feel a part of the same family, and that you'll keep in touch with each other and care about each other, because you know, in the final analysis, what really matters is family.
Yeah, for sure. And this leads me into my next question. And
Yeah.
this is so last time I asked you about your trips just with Grandpa. And this time I want to ask you about just the family trips you had with just your kids, like, so not including going to the Cape or your 80th birthday thing in the Catskills, but rather, like, what were your favorite family trips? Just the 5 of you.
Oh, how many? You mean family trips? But when everybody was growing up, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Anything specific or?
No, nothing specific. I'm just wondering, like, what were some of the experiences you remember?
Oh, some of the experiences. Well, before Grandpa's mother moved to Miami, we drove to Florida a number of times, and that's a long ride from Atlanta to Florida. It's really a long, boring ride, and so that was kind of wearing sometimes. But we had a big station wagon. It was before the days of seat belts, and so the station wagon the back of it would open out, and it would be just this flat, like, platform. And they called it the backpack. And so they would all get in the backpack. And I remember getting a little tape recorder and telling them to make up a story or something. And, you know, so they would do that. We went to Cape Kennedy. We stopped at Cape Kennedy on one of those trips. And that was that was fun. I thought that was fascinating. I don't know if your dad remembers it. Um, one time we stopped at a old classmate of friends of Grandpa's, well, somebody we knew in medical school. And this guy had moved to Gainesville, Florida. You know Gainesville, Florida, that's the home of, you know who? What team is in Gainesville, Florida?
University of Florida.
What are they called? The
Florida
what?
Gators.
Gators, yeah, okay. So this guy had gone into practice. He was a dermatologist. He had gone into practice in Gainesville, Florida. And he was a Jewish couple, and he had like 5 kids, I think. He had a big, big family. So we stopped there on our way down to Miami, and I said to his wife, I said, well, she said, well, stop and come and have dinner. I said, okay. And so we got to be dinner time after we'd sat around, talked, and the kids are all running around. And I said, well, come on, let me help you, whatever, set the table or something. She says, oh, no, the kids will do it. So all of a sudden, these kids who were, they were 10, 11, 5, 7, I don't know. They were elementary school kids and a toddler probably. They all descended on the kitchen, and they all had a job. And there was no squabbling. You do this and you do that, whatnot. They're all squabbling. They're not squabbling. One swept the kitchen and one did this one. And I'm just sitting there amazed, because every time at home, when it was time to, for little chores, everybody says, oh, well, I did that yesterday. Oh, no. So we watched this in amazement, Grandpa and I said, aha, okay, this is what's going to happen. When we got home, we sat everybody down, and we said, okay, these are the chores that have to be done every day. Set the table, clean the dishwasher, sweep the floor, whatever, a list of chores. And I want you all to go upstairs, and I want you to make a chart. And you decide who does what on what day. So it was just Monday through Friday. And you decide who's going to do this and who's going to do that. I don't care how you do it. It doesn't matter to me, just so long as all those things get done. So take this piece of paper, and when you're done, bring it down, and we'll put it up on the refrigerator. And so there's no bickering about who did what, when, how. They all kind of looked at us, and they went upstairs, and they made a chart. And Grandpa thinks that the 2 older ones kind of snookered your father, because he was the youngest, and got him to have to do the chores on Friday, because Friday night was harder than the weekdays. Oh, whether that's really true or not, I don't know. But they rotated, and so they had written up the chart so that who did this on this day did something else the next day, or however they worked it out. I said, I don't care how you work it out. Do whatever you want, but that's what we're going to do. So that was the result of one trip to Florida. We took a trip to Williamsburg. We drove from Atlanta to Williamsburg, Virginia. Have you ever been to Williamsburg?
No, but I have a friend who goes to the College of William and Mary.
Okay. So you know what Williamsburg is?
I don't know.
Okay. So it's this colonial town. They've reconstructed a town that might have looked like in the, during revolutionary times. And the houses are exactly the same. The people walk around in costumes, and they have a blacksmith shop, and they have a candler's shop, people who make candles, and they have, all the things that there would have been, in colonial Williamsburg. And it's really quite nice. And so we decided we were going to do that. So a patient of Grandpa's had said, he'd said to this patient, oh, we're going to take our kids to Williamsburg. And He says, how far is it? Have you ever driven there? Oh, yeah. He says, it's not bad. It's in like 8-9 hours, something like that. Okay. So we didn't rush ourselves to get going in the morning. I don't know, I think we left about 10 o'clock in the morning or something. And we're driving and driving and driving and driving and driving. It turned out to be 12, 13 hours. We got to Williamsburg at midnight. Everybody is just exhausted. Of course, we had reservations at the Williamsburg Inn, which is, again, part of the whole thing. And we spent a couple of days there, and then we drove to Washington, D.C. And here's the story about your dad. We were going to, Uncle Alex wanted to see the Space Museum because the moon rock was there. We'd just come back from the moon. And in a Space Museum, you've been to the Space Museum?
I don't think I've been there. I've been to other Smithsonian's, but I don't think the space.
So you've never been there. Okay. So he wanted to go to the Space Museum. He wanted to see the moon rock. And when he got there, it was in a plexiglass box. And he looked at it, and it's just this piece of gray rock, So it was kind of an anticlimax, to say the least. Anyway, so we went to this museum and that museum and whatnot. And then we said, well, we're going to go and go on a tour of the White House. And in those days, you just stood in a line outside, and they let a certain number of people in at a time. And you just stood there for a little bit. So we were on one side of Pennsylvania Avenue, across from the White House. And we said, okay, now we're going to the White House. So your father sat down on the sidewalk and he said, I'm not going to any more houses.
I've heard this one before.
I said, wait, this is where the president lives. He said, I don't care. I'm not going to any more houses. So we had to pick him up bodily. Grandpa and I, one grabbed one arm and one grabbed the other arm, and we pulled him across Pennsylvania Avenue to go to the White House. And then we kept going. I think the same trip, we went to Boston, and we stayed with Uncle Norman, Aunt Sheila, and Michael and Diana. We went to Concord. We didn't go to Lexington, I don't think. I remember going on the Concord, to something called the Concord Bridge. Is there something called the Concord Bridge?
Yeah, North Bridge, yeah.
Huh?
The old North Bridge, yeah.
Yeah, we did that, and walked around. I don't remember going to Lexington. Maybe we did. Maybe we went to see the statue, that big statue that's there.
Concord's more interesting anyway. It's fine.
What?
Concord's more interesting anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, we did that, and it was very cold. It was Christmas time. I think that's all the same trip. We didn't do great. Well, that was I guess the biggest trip that we did. And then, of course, our big trip was when we went to Israel the first time. So first we went to Venice, because there was an International Congress of Dermatology in Venice. So we went to Venice, and we stayed there for about 4 or 5 days. I think we stayed in a hotel on the beach. And we went in the old Jewish quarter, and your dad chipped his tooth on an elevator, on the floor of an elevator someplace. And then we went on to Israel. But when we got to Venice, it was a long plane ride. You had to fly from Kennedy Airport to Rome, I think it was. And then you had to change planes to go to Venice from Rome. And the whole time over the ocean, we kept telling your dad, Wayne, you ought to try to go to sleep. Close your eyes. Try to go to sleep. Try to go to sleep. Well, I guess he was just too excited. He was just jumping around, and he wouldn't sit still, and just, I guess it was just too exciting, the whole thing. So we got on the plane to Venice, and he fell dead asleep. I mean, dead asleep. So the plane landed, and everybody's getting off. And so we tried to wake him up. I said, Wayne, you know, we're here. Wake up. He just wouldn't wake up. And then when he finally woke up, he was combative, and he's kicking and flailing around. And Grandpa had to pick him up, and his legs are flailing, he's screaming, and making this big scene in the airplane. We finally got him off the plane, and I guess he calmed down eventually. But he was just, you know, he was so exhausted. So then we got to Israel, and we had planned this trip to Israel. It was 1973, and it was all in conjunction with Aunt Marcy's bat mitzvah. We didn't have a party. We just said, well, we're just going to have the bat mitzvah, and we're going to take everybody to Israel. And this Venice thing was all part of it. So we had planned the whole thing. We rented a car, and there was a man here in Atlanta who was the tourist, Israeli tourist thing for the Southeast or something. And we were kind of friends with him. And he helped us plan the route, you know, where you should go and how to travel and all of this kind of thing. And so we rented a car in Jerusalem, and you know, started going all around. And one of the trips was to go to Eilat. When you were in Israel, did you go to Eilat? You did. So we had reservations to stay in a hotel down there, and then we were going to get up really, really, really early in the morning to go to Masada. And so you had to drive through this really windy thing on that side of Masada, because we weren't going to go up the snake path. We were going to walk up the Roman ramp. So when you were there, did you go on the cable car? Did you walk up, or what?
I've done all three. I've done snake path, cable car, and Roman ramp.
Oh, okay. So we decided that the snake path might be just too much for everybody. And we were going to stay in a rod, which was on the other side. And we were going to go take the car and drive to go to the Roman ramp. So the ride from a rod is very windy, and it just goes around and around and around. And P.S., your father got car sick. So we had to stop the car. We had to stop the car.
He was 9, you know.
What?
He was 9, you know.
Yeah. He got car sick. Anyway, so we did that. And then we drove from Arad all the way up the Jordan Valley to a kibbutz where we were staying, called Kfar Bloom, which is an English-speaking kibbutz. It's founded by English and Americans, I think mostly English Americans anyway. And so we told people that we knew in Jerusalem that's what we were going to do. And it was about maybe a 4 or 5 hour ride. And they said to us, you mean you're going to drive from Arad to Kfar Bloom in one day? And we said, well, yeah, it's only, 4 or 5 hours. It's not a big deal. You know, we're thinking about driving to Miami, which takes 10, 11 hours, or to Washington, D.C., and this is like 4 or 5 hours. But in those days, the Israelis said, are you kidding? Anyway, so we did that, and we go to Kfar Bloom. We were staying in Kfar Bloom. First of all, it was English speaking, and second of all, it had a big swimming pool. It had a huge, wonderful swimming pool for the whole, that whole district there. So we got there, and it was we stayed in the guest house. It was great. And then one day we go outside, and they had one television, and the television was perched in a window of the main, the main house, and it was facing outside in like this little courtyard, so that anybody could come and watch television. Of course, there were no televisions in all the rooms, or it was the whole one television for the whole kibbutz. So we go over there and we see a bunch of people standing around the television, and there's something important going on. I couldn't make out enough of it to know what was going on, but it was something important going on. And so we said to them, "What's going on?" Well, they wouldn't tell us what was going on. There was something really big, but we didn't know what it was. So it got time to go to the airport. And so we'd given up the car, I guess, by that time. And so we had to take a taxi from Kfar Bloom to the airport. And so we got in the taxi and we're riding along, and we said to the cab driver, who spoke English, what is going on in Jerusalem? There's something going on in Jerusalem or someplace. What's going on? So he tells us that there was a terrorist attack at the airport, and that a Japanese terrorist had gotten into the airport and had taken a machine gun and just sprayed the airport, the lobby of the airport. That's where we're going. Oh my God, no wonder they wouldn't tell us what was going on. So when we got to the airport, of course, the security was, bananas, and they searched the underside of the car. And I don't know if we had to get out or not. I don't remember. I don't know if we had to get out or not. But it was just crazy. So I said to everybody, I said, "Okay, now listen, this is what happened. So we'll get into the lobby of the airport and check in and whatever we had to do." I said, "If you ever hear loud noises, if you hear loud pops, just lie down on the floor. Just don't ask any questions. Just lie down on the floor. If you hear any kind of crazy sounds or any kind of wild pops, just lie down on the floor." I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. It had happened like maybe 3 days or so before we got there, or 2 days before, but very recent. So it was on everybody's mind, especially mine. Anyway, so that was a big family trip.
Yes, it was.
That was our biggest family trip.
Yeah.
The rest of them were small family trips. There was a little mountain resort in North Georgia, in Clayton, Georgia, called a Bynum House, and it was a place that was run by a family, and they had a big main house, and then they had little cabins, and it was just a little country thing. They had a little swimming pool, and they had a shuffleboard, and they had not much, but anyway. And we used to go there for the 4th of July weekend. We'd spend like 4 days there. And we get in the car, and one time we went to a place called Maggie Valley, which was a place a tourist thing that they had set it up like an old Western town. And so I have a picture of the three kids in an old covered wagon, and you walked around this fake Western town. And we did that, I guess, about 3 years in a row. And it was so popular that you had to make the reservation for the next 4th of July while you were there that 4th of July, or else you wouldn't have gotten in. And it was just a real low-key country place, and they had an old fishing pond in the back, and we'd get some fishing poles and go out there and pretend to be fishing. But they also, not too far away, there was something called a trout farm, where they raised trout, and they charged you to go in. They gave you a fishing pole and gave you food, and you would throw the food into the fishing pond, and the fish would just come up and almost jump out of the water. So we got fishing poles, and Uncle Alex had a fishing pole. Everybody had one, I guess. Maybe your father was too young to hold it. And so all of a sudden he caught a fish. And the fish, he pulls up the fish. I said, pull up the fishing pole. He pulls up the fishing pole. And of course the fish is wiggling around. And we brought the fish over to the shore. And the thing is jumping around. And Uncle Alex just looked at it and he just kind of ran away. He wasn't going to touch that thing. He wasn't going to have anything to do with it. But it was just a real low-key place. And on Saturday night, there was a American Legion Hall, a meeting place, and it had a gym in it, and they had a square dance on Saturday night. And so you went there and they stamped your arm with to show that you'd paid whatever it cost to go in. And you sit there and watch these square dancers. It was country, real country music, nothing fancy. It was fun though. It was fun. I guess that's all that all the family trips I remember.
You covered them all, Grant.
Well, we went to New Orleans once. We drove to New Orleans for Joel, so somebody's bat mitzvah, cousin's bat mitzvah in New Orleans. We drove to New Orleans once, but I think that's about it.
All right, I got two more questions.
Okay.
One easy, one hard. So the easy one first. Who is your favorite president, of your lifetime?
The cruise what?
Who is your favorite president of your lifetime?
Oh, who's my favorite president? Oh, Well, I think I know the first president I voted for was Dwight Eisenhower, and he was a Republican. I voted for him. That was the first time I ever voted. I guess I'd have to say John F. Kennedy because he was so inspiring. He was young, he was energetic, he was just so special. He had such charisma. I guess I'd have to say him. He certainly wasn't perfect, but I guess, he was a little bit older than me. Not that much, I don't think. Wasn't that much older, so it was easy to identify with him. And he was just so charismatic. I just love listening to him, and that Boston twang, which I don't think I'd ever heard anybody talk like that. And so when he was assassinated, it was just devastating. I guess my least favorite president was Richard Nixon until now. Now I have somebody who goes down from the bottom of Richard Nixon.
Not surprising. And now, final question.
Yeah.
When someone says Doris Goldstein 300 years from now, what do you want them to say about you?
Well, first they're going to say, who? What? I never heard of that person. That's ridiculous. What are you asking me a question about some nobody? What would I want them to say, if anybody even bothered? I guess I wanted to say I tried my best. I was a proud Jew. I tried to live life to the fullest and not let life pass me by. I had a family and great-grandchildren. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else. I think that would be about it.
There's no right or wrong answer. Just wanted to know.
What?
There's no right or wrong answers to the question.
No, there is not. No, there is not. Just whoever you would ask that question to, it would be a different answer.
Yeah. All right, and with that, that concludes our second interview.